This activity is going to be about activities. This video is going to be about activities 2 through 5. This is going to be the first meaning of liberty, which is living under a government that protects the person and property of its citizens. Person and property is a shorthand way of talking about those three rights. We just talked about life, liberty, and property, or personal security, personal liberty, and property. So if you go to activity 2A, we get this Madison quotation, a very famous quotation, where he talks about if men were angels, we wouldn't need any government. And what he means by that is he's thinking of angels as beings who do not harm other people. But human beings do harm other people. We are morally flawed in that way. And so because human beings do harm others, murder, rape, and steal, etc., we do need a government to protect person and property. The next letter B of activity 2, Hamilton really going along the same lines, where he talks about people not we need government because the passions of men will not conform to the dictates of reason and justice without constraint. So if we were all acting justly, we wouldn't harm other people. If we were able to do what we know to be right rather than acting on our passions, our desires, our lusts, our emotions, etc., then we would not need government because of the way human beings are, though. We do need government because we harm other people, as well as ourselves, as we'll see. Letter C, this is another famous passage from Thomas Hobbes, where he talks about a time of war where there's no common power to keep people in awe. But awe here means fear, and the common power that he's referring to is government. So when there's a government and we fear the punishment that we will get if we murder, rape, steal, etc., then people will be more restrained in the way we act, Hobbes is saying. So he is envisioning in letter C what life would be like if there was no government, and the way he sees it, there would be a lot more murdering, raping, and stealing, etc., because there would be no fear of doing these things from fear of punishment from government. So, for example, he talks about there wouldn't be industry, by which he means building things, making tables, chairs, other products. There wouldn't be agriculture, because planting things for ourselves and others to eat, because there wouldn't be any reason to take the trouble to do those things, because if we did, someone would just come and steal it. So you need government to have all the things that we're taking for granted, he's saying. And in letter D, this is an important quotation, so I would go back to your book in activity 2, letter D, just kind of highlight this passage, because this is a real definition of the first meaning of liberty. It's a passage that you'll be able to use on your midterm liberty analysis writing assignment, because I'm going to ask you in that paper to go back and use a quotation that defines each meaning of liberty. So the key words in this definition in letter D is Locke saying that where there is no law, there is no freedom, because liberty is to be free from restraint and violence from others, which cannot be where there is no law. So he's talking about governments that have laws against murdering, raping, stealing, and if you don't live somewhere where there's a government that has laws like that and enforces them and punishes wrongdoers, then you won't be free. And so you can see that his understanding here of the meaning of the word free or of liberty is to live under a government that protects its citizens in their person and property, or life, liberty, and property. Moving on to activity 3, really each quotation here just follows up on that thought and just says it in a different way. Locke in letter A says that the reason why people are willing to join in society with others is for the mutual preservation of their lives, liberties, and estates. This quotation is another quotation that defines this meaning of liberty. And let me just pause for a moment and say that when you study for your quiz, your first quiz, I'm going to ask you to be familiar with the quotations. Like I'll give you a quotation such as this one, and you'll need to identify the main thought of it, and in particular in many of the questions, which of the meanings of liberty it's illustrating. And for this first quiz, you're only going to have two meanings of liberty. This one that we're talking about, and then the next one, living under a government that does not harm person and property. So a lot of the questions will be just choosing between those two meanings. Blackstone says something very similar. Blackstone is a legal authority from Great Britain, and we inherited the legal system from Great Britain, which is why I bring this quotation in. But he says here, he names those three rights that we talked about, and begins by saying the principal aim of society is to protect individuals in the enjoyment of those absolute rights which were vested in them by the immutable laws of nature. In other words, again, personal security, personal liberty of property. So I have put on the board here a little diagram of a bad person who hurts people with a little hatchet here, and an innocent person in the life, liberty, and property, and what protects us from others who would harm us is government. And that's the sense of these quotations in Activity 3. The famous line from the Declaration of Independence in letter C is that we have these rights and that governments are instituted among men to secure these rights. Same basic idea, that we have government to protect person and property. Letter D is from a law dictionary and talks about liberty as being secured by the imposition of restraint on people like this. We punish those. We put in prison people who harm others, put restraints on them so they can't harm others, and that's